An infertile millionaire decides to visit an orphanage in search of an heir, and a little boy shouts, "I've been waiting for you for 7 years, Daddy." He is completely shocked to recognize that boy's eyes. Who do you think it was? Leave it in the comments and watch until the end to see the outcome of this beautiful story that will fill your heart with love. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Alexander Richardson stood at the entrance of St. Mary's Orphanage, his Italian leather shoes slightly scuffed from the gravel driveway. The autumn wind tousled his perfectly styled hair, a minor annoyance he quickly corrected with a practiced hand. At 42, he had mastered the art of maintaining an impeccable appearance, much like he had mastered the corporate world. Today's visit was supposed to be another carefully orchestrated public relations event, a brief stop to hand over a check and pose for photographs that would grace the business sections of tomorrow's newspapers. The building before him was unremarkable. Its faded brick facade and weathered windows, a stark contrast to the gleaming skyscrapers he usually frequented. His assistant, Thomas, had briefed him thoroughly on the way here. Shake hands, smile for the cameras, present the donation, and be back in time for the board meeting at 4. Simple, efficient, and perfectly aligned with the image of the compassionate businessman he had cultivated over the years. As he stepped through the entrance, the smell of old wood and cleaning supplies filled his nostrils. The hallway was lined with children's artwork, their bright colors a cheerful attempt to mask the building's age. Sister Margaret, the orphanage's director, greeted him with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had seen too many wealthy donors come and go, their interest in the children lasting only as long as the camera flashes. "Mr. Richardson, we're honored to have you here," she said, leading him through the corridor. "The children are very excited to meet you." Alexander nodded, maintaining his practiced smile. He had perfected this expression over years of business dealings, just enough warmth to seem approachable, but not enough to suggest emotional investment. His mind was already on the afternoon's meeting, where he would be finalizing a billion-dollar merger that would cement his position as one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. The tour proceeded as expected, with Sister Margaret showing him the dormitories, the small library, and the dining hall. Each room held its own stories of loss and hope, but Alexander remained detached, responding with appropriate nods and polite comments at the right moments. His donation would help renovate the building's aging infrastructure, a fact that the press would surely appreciate. As they approached the recreation room, a small commotion caught his attention. A group of children were gathered around a table, engaged in what appeared to be an intense game of chess. All except one, a boy sitting alone by the window, his gaze fixed on the gray sky outside. Something about the child's solitary figure made Alexander pause. The boy couldn't have been more than 10, with dark hair that fell slightly over his eyes and a certain stillness that seemed out of place in a child so young. Without thinking, Alexander found himself walking toward him, drawn by an inexplicable force he couldn't quite understand. The boy turned as Alexander approached, and their eyes met. In that moment, something shifted in the carefully ordered world of Alexander Richardson. The child's eyes were a striking shade of green, the same unusual color that he saw every morning in his own reflection. Before Alexander could process this observation, the boy's expression changed from surprise to recognition, then to something deeper, more profound. His small hands gripped the windowsill as he stood up, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room with crystal clarity. "Te esperé por 7 años, papai." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. His Portuguese was rusty, but he understood perfectly. "I've waited 7 years for you, Daddy." The room seemed to spin as memories he had long suppressed began to surface. Memories of a brief but intense romance with a Brazilian charity worker named Isabella, of passionate promises made and carelessly broken, of a hasty departure driven by ambition and fear. Sister Margaret's sharp intake of breath barely registered as Alexander stared at the boy, seeing now what his mind had initially refused to acknowledge. The shape of the jaw, the set of the shoulders, the way the child held himself. It was like looking at an old photograph of himself. The world he had so carefully constructed began to crumble around the edges as the implications of this moment crashed over. him like a tidal wave. In the heavy silence that followed, Alexander Richardson, the man who had built an empire through calculated decisions and emotional detachment, found himself completely unprepared for the simple truth standing before him. His carefully scripted visit had just veered dramatically off course, and for the first time in decades he had no contingency plan, no practiced response, no way to control the narrative that was unfolding before him. The drive back to his penthouse was a blur. Alexander sat in the back of his Mercedes, his usual composure shattered by the afternoon's events. Thomas had attempted to discuss the upcoming board meeting, but Alexander had silenced him with a sharp gesture. For the first time in years, business was the furthest thing from his mind. The boy's name was Lucas. Sister Margaret had pulled him aside after the shocking revelation, sharing what little information they had. Lucas had arrived at the orphanage 3 years ago, after his mother had fallen ill. The documentation was sparse, but one detail stood out. His mother's name was Isabella Santos. Alexander's hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a drink in his study. The Manhattan skyline sparkled beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, but he barely noticed it. Instead, his mind was caught in a whirlpool of memories he had spent years trying to forget. 7 years ago, he had been a different man. Ambitious, but not yet powerful. Hungry for success, but still capable of genuine emotion. Isabella had been working with a charitable foundation that his company was partnering with. She was beautiful, passionate about her work, and completely unlike the socialites he usually dated. Their romance had been intense but brief, ending when he received the opportunity that would launch his career to new heights. He remembered their last conversation with painful clarity. Isabella had tried to tell him something important, but he had been too focused on his impending departure to really listen. He had promised to call, to stay in touch, but those promises had dissolved in the intoxicating rush of success that followed. A knock at his study door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Richardson?" It was Mrs. Chen, his housekeeper. "The background check reports you requested have arrived." Alexander took the thick envelope she offered, waiting until she left, before tearing it open. The private investigators he kept on retainer had worked quickly. Pages of information about Isabella's life after their separation spilled across his desk. Her work with various charities, her return to Brazil, her pregnancy. Alexander's heart clenched as he read the medical reports from her final days. The last document in the pile was a birth certificate. Lucas Alexander Santos, born 9 months after Alexander had left. There was no father listed, but the middle name spoke volumes. Isabella had given their son his name, even after he had abandoned them. His phone buzzed, another message from the board about tomorrow's merger meeting. Alexander stared at it for a long moment, before making a decision that would have been unthinkable just hours ago. He called his secretary. "Cancel everything for the next week," he instructed, his voice firm despite his inner turmoil. "And get me everything you can find about St. Mary's Orphanage, financial records, board members, inspection reports, everything." As he hung up, Alexander's gaze fell on a framed magazine cover on his wall, his first major feature in Forbes, celebrating his meteoric rise to success. The headline read, "The Man Who Never Loses," but looking at it now, all he could see was what he had lost along the way. A new message popped up on his phone, this one from Sister Margaret. Lucas had been asking about him since he left. The boy wanted to know if he would come back. Alexander found himself staring at those words, feeling the weight of 7 years of absence pressing down on him. In the gathering darkness of his study, Alexander Richardson faced a truth he had been running from for years. His success had come at a price, not just to himself, but to others. He had built his empire on a foundation of calculated decisions and emotional detachment, but now that foundation was cracking. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered his response to Sister Margaret. For the first time in years, he had no strategy, no carefully planned moves to make. All he had was the image of a boy with his eyes, sitting alone by a window, waiting for a father who had never known he existed. What he didn't realize yet was that this was just the beginning. The orphanage held more secrets than just his long-lost son, and his decision to delve into its past would set in motion events that would challenge everything he had built. But for now, all he could focus on was crafting a response to Sister Margaret's message. The first step in what would become the most important journey of his life. The morning sun cast long shadows across St. Mary's playground as Alexander's car pulled up to the entrance for the second time that week. This visit was different. No cameras, no press, no carefully orchestrated photo opportunities. He had dressed more casually today, trading his usual power suit for a navy blazer and khakis, an attempt to appear more approachable. Sister Margaret was waiting for him at the entrance, her expression a mixture of concern and hope. "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate you coming back so soon. Lucas has been different since your last visit, more animated but also more anxious." Alexander nodded, his throat tight. "How do we handle this?" "I've never." He trailed off, realizing how inadequate any explanation would be. "How do you explain to a child why you were absent for his entire life when you can't even justify it to yourself?" The nun's eyes softened. "Just be honest with him, Mr. Richardson. Children often understand more than we give them credit for." They found Lucas in the library, hunched over a chessboard, methodically moving pieces on both sides. Alexander paused in the doorway, struck again by how much the boy reminded him of himself at that age. The same serious expression, the same calculated movements. Lucas looked up as they approached, his green eyes widening. He quickly stood, knocking over several chess pieces in his haste. "You came back," he said in Portuguese, his voice barely above a whisper. Alexander moved closer, kneeling to help pick up the fallen pieces. "Yes," he replied in the same language, his accent heavy but understandable. "I'm sorry it took me so long." The boy's hands trembled slightly as he placed the white king back on the board. "Mama said you might come one day. She said you were very important and busy, but that you had a good heart." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Isabella had every right to tell their son the truth about his abandonment, yet she had chosen to preserve his image instead. The weight of her forgiveness, even after everything he had done, was almost unbearable. "Do you play?" Lucas asked, gesturing to the chessboard, his voice careful and measured. Alexander smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I do. Would you like to teach me your favorite strategy?" For the next hour they played in near silence, communicating through the universal language of the game. Lucas was surprisingly skilled, his moves revealing a strategic mind well beyond his years. Alexander found himself genuinely challenged several times, not holding back as he might have expected to with a child. Between moves, Lucas would glance up at him, studying his face as if memorizing every detail. The boy's questions, when they came, were surprisingly practical. He didn't ask about the past or make emotional demands. Instead, he wanted to know about Alexander's work, his interests, whether he liked dogs, he did, and if he knew how to make pancakes, he didn't. As their third game drew to a close, Lucas finally asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Will you come back again?" Alexander looked at the boy, his son, and felt something shift inside him. The careful walls he had built around his emotions began to crack. "Yes," he said firmly, "as often as you'll let me." Sister Margaret, who had been discreetly observing from a distance, chose that moment to approach. "Lucas, it's almost time for your tutoring session with Mr. Parker." The boy's face fell slightly, but he began carefully arranging the chess pieces back in their starting positions. "Will you come tomorrow?" he asked, not looking up. Alexander glanced at Sister Margaret, who gave a slight nod. "I'll be here," he promised. "Maybe we can play another game?" Lucas's smile was small but genuine. As he left the library, he paused at the door, turning back. "Mama was right about you," he said softly, then disappeared down the hallway. Left alone with Sister Margaret, Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "There's so much I need to know," he said. "About Lucas, about Isabella, about what happened." The nun's expression became guarded. "There are things about this situation that are complicated, Mr. Richardson. The circumstances that brought Lucas to us." She hesitated. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my office." As Alexander followed, Her through the corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to the story than he knew. The way Sister Margaret had hesitated, the careful way Lucas had studied him, even the presence of this mysterious Mr. Parker, everything suggested layers of complexity he was only beginning to glimpse. What he didn't know yet was that his decision to become part of Lucas's life would unravel a web of secrets that stretched far beyond the walls of St. Mary's. But for now, all he could focus on was the warmth in his chest when Lucas smiled, and the growing certainty that, for the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be. Sister Margaret's office was a small room dominated by filing cabinets and a dated computer. She gestured for Alexander to take a seat while she retrieved a thick file from one of the drawers. The label read Lucas Santos in neat handwriting. "Before we continue," she said, settling behind her desk, "I need to know your intentions, Mr. Richardson. Lucas has been through enough. If you're not serious about being in his life..." "Sham?" Alexander interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness of his conviction. "I've missed 7 years, I won't miss any more." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. There are things you need to know." She opened the file, spreading out several documents. "Lucas came to us 3 years ago, after Isabella became ill. She had specifically requested St. Mary's, despite there being other facilities closer to their home." Alexander leaned forward. "Why this orphanage?" "That's one of many questions we've had," Sister Margaret admitted. "The documentation we received was unusual. Everything was in order, almost too perfectly in order, and then there were the financial arrangements." She pulled out a bank statement. "Monthly deposits have been made to an account for Lucas's care. Substantial deposits from an offshore account we haven't been able to trace. At first, we assumed they were from you, but..." "They weren't," Alexander said sharply. "I didn't even know he existed until yesterday." His mind was racing. Who would have arranged this and why? "There's more," Sister Margaret continued. "Lucas receives weekly visits from a tutor, Mr. Parker. He was arranged by the same anonymous benefactor. The man is qualified, certainly, but his curriculum goes far beyond normal elementary education. Advanced mathematics, economics, even basic business principles." Alexander felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had been preparing Lucas, grooming him for something. But what? "Has anyone else shown unusual interest in Lucas?" he asked. Sister Margaret hesitated. "There have been inquiries about his welfare, his progress, always through intermediaries, always very professional. We've maintained strict privacy protocols, as requested by Isabella's final instructions." Alexander's head snapped up. "You have instructions from Isabella?" The nun reached into the file and withdrew a sealed envelope. She left this to be given to Lucas on his 18th birthday, but given the circumstances, she held it out to Alexander. His hands shook slightly as he took the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Isabella's flowing handwriting. As he read, his face grew increasingly pale. "Mr. Richardson," Sister Margaret's voice seemed to come from far away, "is everything all right?" Alexander carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. "No," he said quietly. "Everything is not all right. Isabella knew. She knew something was going to happen to her. This letter, she was trying to warn Lucas, to protect him from something, or someone." He stood abruptly, pacing the small office. The anonymous deposits, the specialized tutoring, the privacy protocols. Someone has been watching Lucas his entire life, planning something. He turned to Sister Margaret. "I need copies of everything you have, every document, every record of these mysterious inquiries. And I need to know more about this Mr. Parker. Mr. Richardson, what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure yet," he admitted, "but I think Isabella chose this orphanage for a reason. She was trying to keep Lucas safe until I found him." He ran a hand through his hair. "And now that I have, I need to understand what she was protecting him from." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Mrs. Chen, Alexander's housekeeper, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Mr. Richardson, I apologize for the interruption, but there's something you need to see immediately." She handed him a tablet, opened to a financial news website. The headline made his blood run cold. "Mystery investor acquires significant stake in Richardson Enterprises. Board meeting called." Alexander looked from the tablet to Isabella's letter, pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet understand beginning to align in his mind. Someone had been preparing for this moment, orchestrating events from the shadows. The question was, who? As if in answer, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The boy plays chess well, doesn't he? Just like his father. Time to make the next move, Alexander. Sister Margaret watched with concern as all color drained from his face. Mr. Richardson? I need to see Lucas again, he said urgently. Now, before... The lights in the office flickered once, then went out, plunging them into darkness. When they came back on a few seconds later, Alexander's expression had changed from concern to determination. Someone was making their move. But this time, he wouldn't be caught unprepared. This time, he had something worth fighting for. The emergency generators hummed in the background as Alexander made his way through St. Mary's dimly lit corridors, Sister Margaret hurrying beside him. His mind raced with the implications of the mysterious message and the power outage. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was sending him a message. They found Lucas in the computer lab with his tutor, Mr. Parker. The man was tall and lean, with wire-rimmed glasses and a precise way of moving that immediately caught Alexander's attention. He seemed unusually calm about the power outage, almost as if he had been expecting it. Mr. Richardson, Parker said smoothly, standing up. What? A pleasant surprise. Lucas and I were just discussing market fluctuations and their impact on corporate valuations. He shows remarkable aptitude for financial concepts. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. This was not typical elementary school curriculum. Lucas, he said, keeping his voice steady, would you like to come with me? We could get some ice cream. If Sister Margaret approves. Lucas looked between his father and his tutor, an unspoken question in his eyes. Parker gave him an almost imperceptible nod, and the boy gathered his things. The interaction was subtle but telling. There was definitely more to this relationship than simple tutoring. As they walked to Alexander's car, Lucas spoke quietly in Portuguese. Mr. Parker teaches me lots of things about your company. He says it's important for me to understand how it works. Alexander helped Lucas into the back seat of his Mercedes, his security team keeping watchful eyes on their surroundings. How long has he been teaching you about my company specifically? Since I came to St. Mary's, Lucas replied, fiddling with his seatbelt. He has lots of files about Richardson Enterprises. Sometimes he makes me memorize things, board members' names, stock prices, company history. The implications made Alexander's stomach turn. Someone had been preparing Lucas, grooming him for something, but what? And why go to such lengths to keep it hidden? They drove to a small ice cream parlor a few blocks away, one of the few places Alexander remembered from his own childhood. As Lucas explored the various flavors, Alexander's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Like father, like son. He has your eye for detail. The question is, will he have your ruthlessness when the time comes? Alexander's grip tightened on his phone. Whoever was behind this knew him, knew his past. The reference to ruthlessness wasn't random. It was a callback to his early days, to the choices he'd made during his rise to power. Papa. Lucas's voice pulled him back to the present. The boy was holding out a spoon of chocolate ice cream. Would you like to try? It's really good. The simple gesture, so innocent and childlike, made Alexander's throat tight. Here was his son offering to share his ice cream while unseen forces plotted around them. The contrast was jarring. They sat at a small table by the window, Lucas happily working his way through his sundae, while Alexander watched the street outside. His security team was positioned discreetly nearby, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Mama used to bring me to places like this, Lucas said suddenly. She would tell me stories about you, about how you were going to change the world with your ideas. Alexander turned back to his son. What else did she tell you about me? Lucas's face grew serious. She said you were smart but lonely. That you built big things but forgot about the small things. And, he hesitated, she said that someday you would need me to remind you about the small things. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Isabella had known. Somehow, she had known. This day would come. She had prepared Lucas not just with business knowledge, but with emotional insight as well. As they finished their ice cream, Alexander's phone buzzed one final time. Time to go home, Alexander. The real game is about to begin. Looking at Lucas, who was carefully wiping ice cream from his chin with a napkin, Alexander made a decision. He couldn't take Lucas back to St. Mary's, not now, not with so many unknowns, but where could they go that would be safe? The answer came to him suddenly. There was one place from his past that very few people knew about, a property he'd kept off the books for sentimental reasons. It was time to go back to where it all began. Lucas, he said gently, how would you like to see where your mother and I first met? The boy's eyes lit up, but there was something else there too. Some flash of understanding that seemed beyond his years. Is it because of the messages you keep getting, the ones that make you worried? Alexander stared at his son, realizing not for the first time that there was much more to Lucas than met the eye. Yes, he admitted. We need to go somewhere safe while I figure some things out. Is that okay with you? Lucas nodded solemnly. Mama always said we might have to run someday. She made me practice packing a bag really fast. He paused, then added, she made me practice a lot of things. As they left the ice cream parlor, Alexander couldn't help but wonder what else Isabella had prepared their son for. And more importantly, what she had known was coming that had made such preparation necessary. The old Victorian mansion stood silently at the end of a private road in the Berkshires, its weathered exterior a testament to years of minimal maintenance. Alexander hadn't visited the property in almost 8 years, not since the day he'd signed the papers that would launch his corporate empire. Now, as he guided his car up the gravel driveway, memories flooded back. This had been the site of the Charity Foundation's summer retreat, where he'd first met Isabella. She had been giving a presentation on sustainable development in South American communities, her passion and intelligence capturing his attention immediately. They'd spent countless hours on the wraparound porch, discussing everything from global economics to their favorite books. Lucas pressed his face against the car window, taking in the sprawling grounds and the forest beyond. It's like a fairy tale house, he said softly. Alexander smiled, remembering Isabella saying almost the same thing the first time she'd seen it. He'd bought the property impulsively after their relationship ended, unable to bear the thought of strangers living here. Now that sentimental decision might prove to be their salvation. The house's security system was state-of-the-art, despite its aged appearance. Alexander had made sure of that, even though he never visited. As they pulled up to the front door, he noticed fresh tire tracks in the gravel. Someone had been here recently. Stay in the car, he instructed Lucas, signaling to his security team. They did a thorough sweep of the property, while Alexander kept a watchful eye on his son, who had pulled out a small notebook and was writing something. What are you working on? Alexander asked, trying to keep his voice casual while his security team cleared the house. Lucas held up the notebook, revealing a series of numbers and symbols. Mr. Parker taught me about codes. I'm trying to figure out the pattern in the license plates of the cars that have been following us. Alexander's breath caught. What cars? The black SUV that's been 3 cars behind us since the ice cream shop, and the blue sedan that kept showing up at St. Mary's during my playground time. Lucas spoke matter-of-factly, as if tracking surveillance vehicles was a normal childhood activity. Mama said I should always pay attention to patterns. Before Alexander could process this revelation, his head of security returned. The house is clear, sir, but someone has definitely been here recently. They left something in the study. Alexander weighed his options. The smart move would be to leave, find another safe house. But whoever was behind this knew about the mansion. They demonstrated that by leaving their message. Running wouldn't solve anything. Lucas, he said, turning to his son, I need you to stay close to me, okay? And if I tell you to run or hide, you do it immediately. No questions. The boy nodded solemnly, tucking his notebook into his pocket. As they walked up to the house, Lucas slipped his small hand into Alexander's, a gesture of trust that made his heart ache. The study was exactly as Alexander remembered it, down to the leather-bound books lining the walls and the antique desk by the window. On the desk sat a single item, a chess piece, the Black Queen. Lucas moved toward it instinctively, but Alexander held him back. "Don't touch it," he warned, examining the piece from a distance. It was identical to the ones from the chess set he and Isabella had used during their games on the porch. "There's something inside it," Lucas observed, pointing to a barely visible seam around the base of the queen. Alexander carefully unscrewed the base, revealing a small USB drive hidden within. His laptop was still in the car, but he hesitated to use it. There was no telling what might be on that drive. Lucas tugged at his sleeve. "I know what to do," he said. "Mr. Parker taught me about safe computers. We need one that's not connected to anything else." Alexander stared at his son, a new understanding dawning. Lucas's education hadn't just been about business. He'd been trained in security protocols, surveillance awareness, and who knew, what else? Isabella and this mysterious Mr. Parker had been preparing him for exactly this type of situation. A noise from somewhere in the house made them both freeze. Alexander's security team was supposed to be watching the perimeter. No, one should be inside. Lucas's grip on his hand tightened. "The secret room," the boy whispered urgently. "Behind the bookshelf. Mama showed me in pictures." Alexander's eyes widened. He'd never known about a secret room, but of course Isabella would have found it. She had always loved exploring old houses, discovering their hidden spaces. As footsteps approached the study, Alexander quickly found the mechanism Lucas had described, a particular book that triggered a hidden door. They slipped inside just as voices became audible in the hallway. In the darkness of the hidden room, Alexander held his son close, listening to the muffled sounds of people entering the study. Lucas's breathing was steady, controlled. He showed no sign of fear, only alert attention. "You know about this place," Alexander whispered, barely audible. "What else do you know?" Lucas's response sent a chill down his spine. "Everything, Papa. Mama said when the time came I would need to know everything. She said I would have to help you remember who you used to be." The voices in the study grew louder, and Alexander could finally make out what they were saying. What he heard made his blood run cold. The game Isabella had warned about wasn't just beginning, it had been in motion for years, and Lucas was at the center of it all. In the darkness of the hidden room, Alexander and Lucas listened intently to the voices in the study. There were at least 3 people, their footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. "The boy's not here," a woman's voice said, crisp and professional. "Richardson must have taken him somewhere else." "The drive?" another voice asked. "Gone too." "They found it." The woman sounded annoyed. "Victoria won't be pleased. We were supposed to control how this played out." Alexander felt Lucas stiffen at the mention of the name. He squeezed his son's hand gently, a silent question. Lucas responded by reaching into his pocket and pulling out his notebook, writing, in the dim light filtering through the hidden door's seams, "Victoria Fuintao, board member." Alexander's mind raced. Victoria Chen had been on his company's board for 5 years, always supportive, always pushing for more aggressive expansion. He'd never suspected she might have ulterior motives. "The study's clear," a third voice reported. "No signs of where they might have gone." "Check the grounds again," the woman ordered. "They have to be somewhere on the property. The security cameras showed them arriving, but no departure." Alexander's pulse quickened. They needed to find a way out, but the only exit he knew of was through the study. Lucas, however, was already moving deeper into the hidden space, pulling his father along with quiet confidence. The secret room was larger than Alexander had initially thought, extending behind the walls of the study. Lucas navigated it with surprising familiarity, despite never having been there before. Isabella's pictures must have been detailed indeed. They came to what felt like a dead end, but Lucas reached up and pressed something. A small panel slid, open, revealing a narrow passageway. "The house was part of the Underground Railroad," Lucas whispered. "Mama made me memorize all the escape routes. She said history always leaves us gifts if we know where to look." Alexander followed his son through the passage, marveling at how thoroughly Isabella had prepared him. The tunnel sloped gently downward, the air growing cooler. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged in what appeared to be an old wine cellar. "There's a door behind those shelves," Lucas said, pointing to the far wall. "It comes out in the garden shed, but we should wait a few minutes to make sure they're not out there." While they waited, Alexander studied his son in the dim light filtering through the cellar's tiny windows. "Lucas," he whispered, "how much do you know about what's happening?" The boy's expression became serious. "Mama said Victoria and her friends wanted to take control of your company. They've been planning it for years." He hesitated. "They wanted to use me somehow. That's why Mama hid me at St. Mary's and made sure I learned about business and computers and staying safe." Alexander's mind was spinning. Victoria Chen had joined the board shortly after Isabella's illness. Had she orchestrated everything? But why go to such lengths? Why involve a child? Lucas touched his arm. "Papa, there's something else. Mr. Parker. He's not just my tutor, he works for someone else, someone who was trying to protect us from Victoria. But I don't know who." A noise from upstairs made them both fall silent. Footsteps crossed the floor above. Them then faded. Lucas consulted his notebook again, making a small mark. "They're following a search pattern," he observed. "They'll check the cellar soon. We should go." The garden shed was exactly where Lucas said it would be, and mercifully empty. Through its dusty window, they could see two men in dark suits patrolling the grounds. Alexander pulled out his phone, intending to call his security team, but Lucas stopped him. "Not yet," he whispered. "Mama said never to call for help until you're sure who's really on your side." The wisdom in those words struck Alexander hard. How many people in his organization might be working for Victoria? How long had this conspiracy been growing right under his nose? A buzz from his phone made them both jump. Another message from the unknown number. "The Queen's secrets run deeper than the tunnels. Time to visit the castle's true keeper." Lucas read the message over his shoulder, and his eyes widened. "Papa, I know what that means. Mama used to call someone the castle keeper. A lawyer, I think. She said if anything happened, we should find him. Did she give you a name?" Lucas shook his head. "But she left me a riddle about where to find him. She said when the time came, you'd help me solve it." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, covered in Isabella's handwriting. As Alexander read the riddle, memories stirred. He recognized the pattern in the clues, the way they referenced shared moments from his past with Isabella. She had woven their history into a map, knowing that only he could help Lucas navigate it. "I know where we need to go," Alexander said softly. "But getting there won't be easy. Are you ready?" Lucas straightened his shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of Isabella that it made Alexander's heart ache. "Mama said you'd ask me that. She said to tell you, the best moves in chess are the ones your opponent thinks are mistakes." Alexander couldn't help but smile. Even now, Isabella was guiding them, her foresight and wisdom reaching across time to protect their son. She had known this day would come, had prepared Lucas for it in ways Alexander was only beginning to understand. What he didn't know yet was that the castle keeper held more than just legal documents. He held the key to understanding why Victoria and her allies had gone to such lengths to control Lucas's future. And more importantly, he held the truth about Isabella's final days, a truth that would shake the foundations of everything Alexander had built. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Central Park as Alexander and Lucas made their way through the winding paths. They had managed to slip away from the mansion using one of Isabella's planned escape routes, and now, after a series of calculated movements to ensure they weren't followed, they were approaching their destination. The Belvedere Castle loomed before them, its Victorian Gothic architecture a stark contrast to the modern skyline beyond. Lucas walked with purpose, counting his steps and occasionally consulting the riddle. "Mama said the castle keeper isn't in the castle," he explained. "But the castle shows the way to find him." Alexander watched as his son studied the structure, applying the clues from Isabella's riddle. The boy's methodical approach reminded him so much of himself, but there was an intuitive element, pure Isabella. in the way Lucas connected seemingly unrelated details. "There!" Lucas pointed to a particular stone in the castle's facade. "Look at the pattern. It matches the chessboard coordinates in the riddle." Alexander examined the stone and the surrounding architecture. The pattern did indeed match the sequence Isabella had written down, and something about it triggered a memory. Years ago, during one of their early dates, Isabella had brought him here to show him something special about the castle's design. "The architect's signature," Alexander murmured. "Each of his buildings had a hidden marker pointing to." "The next one," Lucas finished excitedly, "like a treasure map across the city." They followed the architectural breadcrumbs, moving through the park and into the city streets. Lucas demonstrated an uncanny knowledge of New York's layout, another gift from his mother's careful preparation. Their path led them to an unremarkable office building in the financial district. The directory in the lobby listed dozens of law firms, but one caught Alexander's eye: Castle and Stone Legal Services. "That's it," Lucas said confidently. "Mama," said the castle keeper, hides in plain sight, just like the best chess moves. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was tense. Alexander's phone had remained silent since the message at the mansion, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into another layer of this elaborate game. The offices of Castle and Stone were modest, but elegant. A receptionist looked up as they entered, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Alexander Richardson. Before she could speak, an older man emerged from one of the private offices. "I've been expecting you both," he said warmly. "Though I must admit, you've arrived sooner than we anticipated." He turned to Lucas with a gentle smile. "You must be even cleverer than your mother said you would be." Lucas studied the man carefully. "You're not the castle keeper," he said, after a moment. "You're the stone." The lawyer's smile widened. "Very good. Edward Stone at your service. And you're right, I'm not the keeper, but I know where to find him." He gestured for them to follow him into his office. Once inside, Stone retrieved a thick file from a hidden safe. "Isabella entrusted us with this 7 years ago. She said you would come looking for it when the time was right." He handed the file to Alexander. "Everything you need to know about Victoria Chen's true agenda is in there." Alexander opened the file, his expression darkening as he read. Lucas watched his father's face intently, noting every micro-expression just as Mr. Parker had taught him. "This is impossible," Alexander finally said. "Victoria was working on this plan even before she joined the board?" Stone nodded gravely. "Isabella discovered it quite by accident. She was doing research for the charitable foundation when she found the connection between Victoria and certain offshore accounts that had been quietly buying up shares in your company for years." "But why?" Alexander asked. "Why go to all this trouble? Why involve Lucas?" "Because of what you built," Stone explained. "Your company's technology, its patents, its market position, it's all valuable. But what Victoria really wanted was your legacy." He turned to Lucas. "More specifically, she wanted to control who would inherit that legacy." Lucas pulled out his notebook, flipping to a clean page. "She wanted to use me to take over Papa's company," he said matter-of-factly. "That's why Mama made sure I learned everything about business and computers, so I could understand what was happening." Stone's expression was impressed. "Your mother said you were special. She knew you would need to be prepared for this moment." He reached into his desk and withdrew another envelope. "Which is why she left you this." The envelope was addressed to Lucas in Isabella's handwriting. The boy took it carefully, his fingers tracing the letters of his name. "Before you open that," Stone said, "there's something else you both need to know. The castle keeper, the real one, left something for you, too. A way to turn Victoria's plan against her." Alexander leaned forward. "Who is the castle keeper?" Stone's answer was interrupted by a commotion in the outer office. Voices were raised, and footsteps approached rapidly. "It seems we have less time than I hoped," Stone said calmly, pressing a button under his desk. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a hidden corridor. "The service elevator will take you to the basement. There's a car waiting. The driver knows where to take you." "To the castle keeper?" Alexander asked. Stone smiled mysteriously. To someone even more important. Someone who's been watching over Lucas since the day he was born. He looked at the boy knowingly. Someone your mother trusted more than anyone else in the world. As they hurried through the hidden passage, Lucas clutched both the envelope and his notebook tightly. "Papa," he whispered, "I think I know who we're going to meet." Alexander looked at his son questioningly. "The person who's been sending you the messages," Lucas said. "The one who knew about the chess games and the Queen's secret." He paused, his green eyes bright with certainty. "We're going to meet my grandmother." The service elevator descended smoothly to the basement level of the building. Alexander kept one hand protectively on Lucas's shoulder, his mind racing with the implications of what his son had just said. A grandmother. Isabella's mother. He tried to remember if Isabella had ever mentioned her family, but those memories from 7 years ago were frustratingly hazy. The basement parking garage was dimly lit and nearly empty. A single black Mercedes waited for them, its engine running. As they approached, the back door opened, revealing an elegant woman in her early 60s. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her posture spoke of old money and refined power. But it was her eyes, the same striking green as Lucas's, that made Alexander stop in his tracks. "Hello, Alexander," she said in perfect English, though with a hint of a Brazilian accent. "I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." She turned to Lucas with a warm smile. "Meu querido neto, you've grown so much." Lucas didn't hesitate. He moved forward and hugged the woman with familiar ease. "Vovó Helena," he said softly. "Mama said you would be watching." Helena Santos held her grandson close for a moment before gesturing for them both to enter the car. As they pulled out of the garage, she fixed Alexander with a penetrating gaze. "I suppose you have questions," she said. "About why I've remained hidden all these years, about why Isabella chose to keep Lucas's existence a secret from you, about Victoria Chen and her plans for your company." "You're the one who's been sending me the messages," Alexander said. It wasn't a question. Helena nodded. "Someone had to guide you to Lucas at the right moment. Victoria's plans were accelerating. We needed you to find him before she could make her move." The car wound through the city streets, taking an indirect route that Alexander recognized as a standard security procedure. Lucas sat between them, quietly writing in his notebook. "What exactly is Victoria planning?" Alexander asked. The file at Stone's office suggested something bigger than a simple corporate takeover. "Victoria Chen is merely a face for a much larger organization," Helena explained. "They've been working for decades to control key technology companies, particularly those with significant influence over global infrastructure. Your company's innovations in sustainable energy and data security make it a prime target." Lucas looked up from his notebook. "That's why Mr. Parker taught me about Papa's patents and market strategy, so I could understand what they wanted to." "For Hake!" Helena smiled proudly at her grandson. "Exactly, querido. Isabella knew that Victoria would try to use you to gain control. A long-lost heir, suddenly discovered and groomed to take over. It would have been the perfect story to sway shareholders and the board. But Isabella prevented that," Alexander said slowly, pieces falling into place. "By hiding Lucas at St. Mary's, by preparing him with knowledge that would help him understand and resist manipulation." "My daughter was always 3 steps ahead," Helena said, a touch of sadness in her voice. "She knew what was coming even before—" She trailed off, glancing at Lucas. The boy reached out and took his grandmother's hand. "It's okay, Vovo. I know Mama did everything to protect me. That's why she made sure I learned chess, not just to play, but to think strategically." Alexander watched this interaction with a mixture of emotions. The bond between Lucas and his grandmother was obvious, built on years of secret contact and shared understanding. He felt a pang of regret for all the time he had missed, all the moments he could have had with his son. "Where are we going?" he asked, as the car turned onto the West Side Highway, heading north. "To the real castle," Helena replied. "The place where Isabella first discovered Victoria's plans and where she left the evidence we need to stop them." Lucas's eyes lit up. "The research facility. Mama used to work there, didn't she?" Before she met Papa? Helena nodded. It's where everything began, and now it's where we'll find what we need to end it. The car continued north, leaving the city behind. Alexander's phone buzzed one final time. The message was different now, no longer cryptic. The pieces are in position. Time to show Victoria what a real chess master can do. He looked at Helena, who smiled. That wasn't from me this time, she said. Check the signature. Alexander scrolled down, his breath catching as he saw the initials at the bottom. I.S. Impossible, he whispered. Lucas peered at the phone, then consulted his notebook. No, Papa, not impossible. Look at the timestamp. This message was scheduled to be sent today, 7 years ago. Mama left us a trail of digital breadcrumbs, timed to activate when we needed them most. Alexander stared at his son in amazement. Even now, Isabella was helping them, her brilliant mind having anticipated and planned for this very moment. She had encoded her guidance in chess moves, hidden it in architecture, embedded it in scheduled messages, all to ensure that when the time came, they would have everything they needed to protect their son. As the car wound through the increasingly wooded landscape, Helena pulled out a tablet. There's something you both need to see before we arrive. Isabella left a video message, meant to be watched at exactly this moment. Lucas and Alexander leaned closer as Helena pressed play. Isabella's face appeared on the screen, looking exactly as Alexander remembered her. She smiled, her green eyes bright with intelligence and determination. If you're watching this, she began, then everything is proceeding exactly as we planned. Alexander, my love, I'm sorry for keeping Lucas from you, but it was the only way to keep him safe until you were ready to face what's coming. And Lucas, meu filho querido, it's time for you to understand the full truth about your heritage and the real reason Victoria Chen wants to control your father's company. Isabella's recorded image smiled at them from the tablet screen, her presence as powerful now as it had been in life. The truth begins with a discovery I made while working at the castle research facility. We were developing new methods of sustainable energy distribution, ways to make power accessible to communities that had been left behind by traditional infrastructure. She paused, looking directly into the camera as if she could see them watching. But I found something else in the data, patterns that shouldn't have been there, signs that someone was using our research for a different purpose. The video cut to technical diagrams and code sequences that made Alexander's eyes widen. He recognized elements of his company's current technology, but there was something more, something he had never seen before. Victoria Chen's organization wasn't interested in sustainable energy, Isabella continued. They were interested in control. The distribution networks we were designing could be modified to create dependency, to hold entire regions hostage to their demands. Alexander, the patents you've developed since then, they're the missing pieces. They need to complete their system. Lucas was scribbling furiously in his notebook, his hand flying across the page as he documented every detail. Helena watched him with a mixture of pride and concern. But I built in a safeguard, Isabella's voice continued. A weakness that only becomes apparent when you understand the full scope of their plan. That's why Lucas needed to learn about business, about technology, about chess, because the solution requires understanding how all the pieces move together. The car turned onto a private road, winding deeper into the woods. Through the trees, they caught glimpses of a modern building complex, the castle research facility. The evidence is hidden in the facility's original servers, Isabella explained, but accessing it requires a specific sequence of steps, a pattern based on our shared history. She smiled again. Alexander, do you remember our first chess game? The way you let me win because you thought it would impress me? Alexander couldn't help but smile at the memory. You called me out on it immediately, he said to the screen, said you'd rather lose honestly than win through someone else's manipulation. The winning move from that game is the first key, Isabella continued, as if she had heard him. Lucas knows the rest. We've been practicing them his entire life, disguised as games and puzzles. The video shifted, showing Isabella in a different setting, recorded later. She looked more tired, but her determination was unchanged. "Lucas, mio amor, by now you've met your father. You've seen the good heart that I fell in love with, the brilliant mind that sometimes forgets to look beyond the board to see the larger game. Help him remember who he was before success made him cautious, before he started playing not to lose instead of playing to win." Lucas reached out to touch the screen, his fingers tracing his mother's image. "I will, Mama," he whispered. "And Alexander," Isabella's voice softened, "I never stopped loving you. Even when I discovered what Victoria was planning, even when I had to hide our son to protect him, I knew that someday you would find your way back to the man I knew, the man who wanted to change the world for the better, not just control it." The car pulled up to the facility's security gate. Helena produced an ID card that made the guards snap to attention. "Everything you need is waiting inside," Isabella's recording concluded. "The evidence, the safeguards, the truth about Victoria's organization, but most importantly, you have each other. Lucas has your mind for strategy, Alexander, and my heart for seeing the truth behind the moves. Together, you can finish what I started." The video ended, freezing on Isabella's smile. Lucas carefully closed his notebook and looked up at his father. "Ready to play the final game, Papa?" Alexander looked at his son, seeing both Isabella's intuition and his own analytical mind reflected in those green eyes. "What's our first move?" "Actually," Helena interjected, checking her phone, "Victoria's making it for us. She just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. She's going to try to force a vote to remove you as CEO." "Can she do that?" Lucas asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "She thinks she has the votes," Helena explained. "What she doesn't know is that Isabella left us a way to expose her true plans to the board. But we have to get the evidence. Tonight." The security gate opened, and their car proceeded up the winding driveway to the main building. The facility's modern architecture gleamed in the setting sun, its walls of glass reflecting the surrounding forest. "Mama said the truth is hidden in plain sight," Lucas said, studying the building. "Just like the best chess strategies." He pulled out Isabella's letter, unopened until now. "I think it's time to read what she left for us." As Lucas broke the seal on the envelope, Alexander felt a surge of anticipation. Whatever Isabella had planned, whatever she had discovered about Victoria's true intentions, they were about to take the next step in a game 7 years in the making. The paper inside contained no words, only a series of chess moves annotated in Isabella's distinctive hand. Lucas smiled as he read them, recognition lighting up his face. "Papa," he said, looking up at his father with excitement, "do you remember the game you and Mama played the night she told you she was leaving the foundation to start her own research?" Alexander's mind raced back to that evening, to the unconventional strategy Isabella had used, the way she had sacrificed her queen to achieve an unexpected victory. The same strategy she had apparently been using all along, sacrificing her position to protect her king and prince, setting up a win that would take years to achieve. The pieces were finally in position. The game Isabella had started was about to reach its endgame. The research facility's corridors were eerily quiet in the evening hours. Helena led them through a series of security checkpoints, her old credentials still opening doors that should have been long sealed. Lucas walked between his father and grandmother, his notebook open, comparing the building's layout to something he had memorized. "The server room is in the basement," Helena explained, "but we can't go directly there. Isabella built in security, measures to prevent unauthorized access, even if someone had the right credentials." "A chess game," Lucas said, consulting his notes. "We have to visit specific locations in the right order, just like moving pieces on a board." Alexander studied the floor plan displayed on a wall. "The research labs form a grid pattern, like a chessboard." "Exactly," Helena confirmed. "Isabella designed it that way when she was head of research. Victoria never understood the significance. She always thought it was just an efficient layout design." Their first stop was a small laboratory on the 4th floor. Lucas immediately went to a specific workstation, powering up the old computer there. "This was Mama's desk," he said, confidently. "The Queen's starting position." Alexander watched in amazement, as his son's fingers flew across the keyboard, entering commands that seemed far too complex for a 10-year-old. "Mr. Parker taught you this." "Some of it," Lucas replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. "But Mama left me video lessons too. I've been studying them my whole life, preparing for this moment." The screen flashed green, and Lucas smiled. First move complete. They moved through the building, following Isabella's chess-based security protocol. Each stop required specific actions, running programs, entering codes, activating dormant systems. Lucas led the way, his understanding of the pattern uncanny in its precision. "Your mother designed this whole system knowing that someday you would need to access it," Alexander realized. "Everything, your chess lessons, your business education, the coding tutorials, it was all preparation for this moment." "Not just for this," Helena corrected. "Isabella knew that Victoria would try to use Lucas to control your company. She wanted him to understand enough to resist manipulation, to see through their schemes." At their fifth stop, a corner office that had once belonged to Isabella, Lucas found something unexpected, hidden in a false bottom of an old desk. Drawer was a small photo album. The pictures inside showed Isabella with a very young Lucas, teaching him chess, reading to him, always preparing him for what was to come. "I remember these," Lucas said softly, touching one of the photos. "Mama would tell me stories about each move she was teaching me, making them into adventures so I'd remember them better." Alexander felt his throat tighten as he looked at the images of the son he hadn't known, the early years he had missed. But there was no time for regret. A message on his phone warned that Victoria's people had discovered their presence in the building. "We need to hurry," Helena urged. "They'll be here soon." The final sequence led them to the server room. The space was dominated by older hardware, carefully maintained despite its age. Lucas went straight to a specific server bank, his movements sure and purposeful. "This is it," he said, connecting his tablet to the system. "The evidence Mama found about Victoria's real plan, but..." He frowned, studying the screen. "There's something else here. Something Mama left specifically for us to find tonight." The server hummed to life and a video began playing on Lucas's tablet. Isabella appeared, looking directly into the camera. "If you're seeing this," she began, "then you're hours away from Victoria's attempt to seize control of the company. She thinks she has everything planned perfectly. The board votes lined up, the press releases prepared, even a narrative about how Lucas's discovery will legitimize the transition of power." Isabella's image smiled, a familiar glint of strategic brilliance in her eyes. But there's one thing Victoria never understood about chess. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't about what you do. It's about what you make your opponent do. The server began downloading files to Lucas's tablet. Documents, emails, financial records. A web of evidence showing not just Victoria's plans, but the larger conspiracy behind them. "This isn't just about saving my father's company, is it?" Lucas asked, looking up at his grandmother. Helena shook her head. "Victoria's organization has been trying to gain control of key technology companies for years. They want to create a system of dependency, using sustainable energy infrastructure as a means of control." "But Isabella found a way to stop them," Alexander said, reading through the documents. "She built a fatal flaw into the original research, one that only becomes apparent when you understand the full scope of their plan." Lucas nodded, his expression serious beyond his years. "That's why she made sure I learned everything about Papa's company, about the technology, about how all the pieces fit together. We need to understand the whole board to see the winning move." A noise from above made them all freeze. Footsteps were approaching, multiple sets, moving with purpose. "They're here," Helena said quietly. "But it doesn't matter. We have what we need." Lucas quickly disconnected his tablet, but not before initiating one final program. One that Isabella had prepared years ago, waiting for this exact moment. "What did you just do?" Alexander asked, recognizing the look of satisfaction on his son's face. The same expression Isabella used to have after executing a particularly clever chess move. "Mama's last gift," Lucas replied, a small smile playing at his lips. "She called it the Queen's Gambit, By this time tomorrow, Victoria's going to learn why you should never underestimate a mother's ability to protect her child. As they made their way to the emergency exit, Alexander realized that the game wasn't just about saving his company. It was about completing a strategy that Isabella had set in motion 7 years ago, a strategy that required both father and son to play their parts perfectly. Dawn broke over Manhattan as Alexander's car pulled up to Richardson Enterprises headquarters. The morning news was already buzzing with speculation about the emergency board meeting, but none of the reporters gathered outside knew the real story that was about to unfold. Lucas sat in the back seat, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that Helena had somehow produced overnight. He looked remarkably composed for a 10-year-old about to walk into a corporate battleground. "Remember," Helena said, adjusting Lucas's tie, "Victoria expects you to be just a child, someone she can mold and manipulate. That's her first mistake." Alexander watched his son review the notes in his ever-present notebook one last time. The boy had spent hours studying the evidence they'd retrieved, understanding every nuance of Victoria's plan and Isabella's countermeasures. "Are you ready?" Alexander asked. Lucas looked up, his green eyes bright with determination. "Mama always said the hardest part of chess is making your moves look like mistakes until it's too late for your opponent to recover." They entered the building through a private entrance, avoiding the press. The executive floor was already buzzing with activity. Board members and senior executives hurried through the corridors, their faces tense with anticipation. Victoria Chen stood in the boardroom doorway, her expression careful as she watched them approach. "Alexander," she said smoothly, "I see you've brought your unexpected guest." "My son," Alexander corrected firmly, "Lucas Richardson." Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, surprise perhaps that they were acknowledging the relationship so openly. Her gaze fixed on Lucas, evaluating, calculating. "Of course," she said, "this must be quite overwhelming for you, young man. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting in the executive lounge while we handle these technical matters." Lucas met her gaze steadily. "Actually, Miss Chen, I believe I should be present. After all, this meeting concerns my father's company and my inheritance." Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. This wasn't how she had planned this moment. The child was supposed to be malleable, easily guided by the narrative she had crafted. The boardroom filled quickly. Alexander took his usual seat at the head of the table, with Lucas choosing to sit not beside him, but at the opposite end, a move that raised eyebrows among the board members. "Before we begin," Victoria announced, standing to address the room, "I think we need to discuss the serious concerns that have been raised about the company's current leadership. In light of recent developments, including the discovery of Mr. Richardson's previously unknown heir, the board needs to consider what's best for the company's stability." She gestured to her assistant, who began distributing folders to the board members. "These documents outline a transition plan that will ensure smooth continuity of leadership while protecting the interests of all stakeholders." "Interesting choice of words," Lucas said clearly, his voice carrying across the room. "Stability, continuity, protection." He opened his notebook. "My mother used similar terms in her research notes 7 years ago." Victoria froze. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Isabella Santos," Lucas continued, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. "She was studying how control systems could be embedded in sustainable energy infrastructure, the same technology that Richardson Enterprises has been developing, the same systems that your organization has been trying to manipulate." The board members looked between Lucas and Victoria, confusion evident on their faces. Alexander sat back, allowing his son to take the lead, just as Isabella had planned. "Mr. Parker," Lucas called out, "perhaps you could help explain. After all, you've been reporting to both sides, haven't you?" The door opened and Mr. Parker entered, carrying a laptop. Victoria's face paled slightly as she recognized him, not as the simple tutor she had thought him to be, but as someone else entirely. "Thomas Parker," he introduced himself to the board, "former intelligence operative, currently working as an independent investigator. Miss Santos hired me 7 years ago to monitor Victoria Chen's organization and protect her son. He connected his laptop to the boardroom's display system. With the board's permission, I have some information that might help inform today's discussion. What followed was a masterclass in strategic revelation. The evidence Isabella had gathered, combined with years of Mr. Parker's surveillance, painted a clear picture of Victoria's true agenda. The board watched in stunned silence as the scope of the conspiracy unfolded before them. But it was Lucas who delivered the final move. Standing up, he walked to the center of the boardroom. Ms. Chen believed that controlling me would give her control of this company, he said, his voice clear and confident. What she didn't realize was that my mother spent 7 years making sure that would never happen. Everyone in this room needs to understand something. I am not a piece to be played. I am my father's son and my mother's legacy. He turned to face Victoria directly. Check, he said softly. The tablet in front of Victoria suddenly lit up with a new message. As she read it, the color drained from her face. Isabella's final program had activated, triggering a cascade of revelations that would dismantle her organization's carefully constructed plans. Alexander watched with pride as his son handled the chaos that followed, answering questions from board members with a poise that reminded him so much of Isabella. They had done it, completed the strategy she had set in motion all those years ago. But as the morning wore on, he realized that this wasn't just about winning a corporate battle. It was about understanding the legacy that Isabella had created. Not just in the company's technology or in the evidence she had gathered, but in the remarkable young man who stood before them, combining the best of both his parents. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Alexander's office as he watched the news coverage of Victoria Chen's resignation. The business channels were buzzing with speculation about the sudden leadership changes at several major technology companies, all connected to Victoria's organization. But they were missing the bigger story, the one that Isabella had uncovered 7 years ago. Lucas sat in one of the oversized leather chairs, still in his perfectly tailored suit, working on something in his notebook. The events of the morning had left the board in awe of him, but he seemed unfazed by their reaction. He was, Alexander realized, exactly what Isabella had prepared him to be: composed, intelligent, and unfailingly strategic. Mr. Parker is helping Vovo organize the rest of the evidence, Lucas said, not looking up from his writing. She says there are other companies that need to be warned about Victoria's partners. Alexander nodded, studying his son's focused expression. You handled yourself incredibly well today. Your mother would be proud. Lucas finally looked up, a small smile playing at his lips. She knew I could do it. That's why she made sure I learned everything I would need. He hesitated, then asked, Are you staying this time, Papa? The question caught Alexander off guard. Despite everything they had accomplished together, there was still so much uncertainty between them. Yes, he said firmly, I'm not going anywhere. We have a lot of time to make up for. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Thomas, Alexander's assistant, carrying a large package. This just arrived for Lucas, he said. It's from the Castle Research Facility. Lucas's eyes lit up as he opened the package. Inside was an old chess set, the same one Isabella had used to teach him strategy through their video calls. Beneath it was another envelope, marked with today's date. Another message from Mama? Alexander asked, moving to look over his son's shoulder. Lucas shook his head. No, this is different. He opened the envelope carefully, revealing a series of documents. These are patents, early versions of the sustainable energy systems, with notes about how to fix the vulnerabilities Victoria's people tried to exploit. Alexander examined the documents with growing amazement. Isabella hadn't just exposed the conspiracy, she had provided the solution to prevent it from happening again. The technical specifications detailed a way to make the energy distribution systems truly democratic, impossible to use for control or coercion. She left us a blueprint, Lucas explained, his voice filled with understanding. Not just for protecting the company, but for making sure the technology helps people the way it was supposed to. They spent the next few hours going through Isabella's notes together. Alexander found himself repeatedly amazed by the depth of her foresight and by Lucas's ability to grasp complex technical concepts. The boy's education had clearly gone far beyond what even Victoria had suspected. As evening approached, Helena joined them, bringing dinner and more files from Mr. Parker's investigation. "The board is already implementing new security protocols," she reported, "and several of Victoria's former allies have reached out, wanting to cooperate with the investigation." "They're scared," Lucas observed, setting up the chess pieces on Isabella's old board. "They know Mama's evidence could expose their whole network." Alexander watched as his son arranged the pieces with practiced care. "What do you think we should do with the information?" Lucas considered the question seriously. "Mama always said that winning wasn't about taking advantage, it was about making things right." He moved a pawn forward. "We should use the evidence to fix the problems, not to hurt people." Helena smiled proudly. Isabella would agree. She built all of this to protect people, not to seek revenge. Alexander sat down opposite Lucas at the chessboard. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll use the patents to improve the technology, make it safer, and we'll help the other companies protect themselves from similar takeover attempts. Like a good chess strategy," Lucas said, his green eyes bright with intelligence. "Protecting your pieces while helping your opponent avoid mistakes." As they played, Alexander found himself remembering his early games with Isabella, the way she had taught him to look beyond immediate advantages, to see the larger patterns. Now their son was teaching him the same lesson, showing him how to turn corporate strategy into something more meaningful. A message appeared on Alexander's phone, the last scheduled communication from Isabella's program. "The game isn't over when you win. It's over when you've made the board a better place for all the pieces." Lucas read the message and smiled. "That's from our last video lesson," he said. "Mama was teaching me about corporate responsibility. She said that real success isn't about having the most power. It's about using your position to help others." Alexander looked at his son with new understanding. Isabella hadn't just prepared Lucas to defeat Victoria's schemes, she had prepared him to be a different kind of business leader, one who could combine strategic thinking with genuine compassion. The chess game between them continued, but it was more than just a game now. It was a bridge between past and present, a way for father and son to learn each other's moves, to understand each other's minds. And with each move, Alexander saw more clearly the remarkable future that Isabella had envisioned, not just for their company, but for their family. The next few days brought a whirlwind of changes to Richardson Enterprises. The board, still processing the revelations about Victoria's conspiracy, unanimously supported Alexander's new initiative to reshape the company's approach to sustainable energy development. But the biggest changes were happening on a more personal level. Alexander had moved Lucas into his penthouse, converting his rarely used home office into a bedroom. The space quickly transformed from its stark, minimalist design into something warmer, filled with chess books, technical manuals, and the personal items Lucas had kept at St. Mary's. Helena helped with the transition, her presence providing a crucial link to the life Lucas had known before. One morning, as they ate breakfast together, Lucas brought out his notebook. "I think I understand now why Mama did everything the way she did," he said, showing Alexander a page filled with his careful analysis. "She wasn't just protecting me from Victoria, she was making sure I would be ready to help you remember something important." Alexander looked at his son's notes with interest. "What was I supposed to remember? Why you started the company in the first place?" Lucas flipped to another page, revealing newspaper clippings about Richardson Enterprises. "Early days. You wanted to help people, to make clean energy available to everyone. But somewhere along the way you started focusing more on power than purpose." The observation, so precise and yet so gentle, reminded Alexander startlingly of Isabella. "When did you collect these articles?" "Mr. Parker helped me build a file about you," Lucas explained. "Mama wanted me to understand who you were, not just what you had become. She said there was a difference." Helena, who had been quietly sipping her coffee, smiled. "Isabella never lost faith in who you really were, Alexander. She knew that someday you would need to be reminded of your original vision, and that Lucas would be the one to help you remember. The morning sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as Alexander absorbed this insight. He had spent years building his corporate empire, measuring success in stock prices and market share. But looking at Lucas, seeing the perfect blend of his strategic mind and Isabella's compassionate heart, he realized how far he had drifted from his initial dreams. "What would you like to do first?" he asked Lucas. "To help get the company back on track." Lucas didn't hesitate. "The orphanage," he said firmly. "St. Mary's needs better facilities, and there are other orphanages that need help too. We could use our technology to make their buildings more efficient, save them money on energy costs." "A pilot program," Alexander mused, seeing the potential. "We could develop a model for providing sustainable energy solutions to non-profit organizations." "Exactly." Lucas's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "And we could work with other companies, the honest ones, to expand the program." Mama's notes included ideas for partnerships that could help make clean energy accessible to everyone. Helena watched their exchange with satisfaction. "Isabella would love this," she said softly. "Using the company's resources to help children like those at St. Mary's, it brings everything full circle." As they discussed the details of the initiative, Alexander's phone buzzed with messages from board members and executives, all eager to align themselves with the company's new direction. But he found himself more interested in watching Lucas sketch out his ideas, the boy's natural grasp of both business strategy and social impact showing through in every suggestion. "We should visit the orphanage today," Lucas said suddenly. "Sister Margaret should know what's happening and—" He hesitated. "I want to say goodbye to my friends there properly." Alexander felt a pang of emotion at the reminder that Lucas had built a life at St. Mary's, formed relationships that mattered to him. "Of course," he said. "We can go whenever you're ready. And perhaps," Helena added, "we could discuss making some improvements to the educational programs there. Mr. Parker has expressed interest in continuing to work with children who show aptitude for technology and business." Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "We could set up a proper computer lab, maybe start a chess club." He turned to Alexander. "Would you help teach sometimes, Papa? You could show them how business is like chess." The request, so simple and yet so meaningful, touched Alexander deeply. "I'd like that," he said. "Very much." As they finished breakfast and prepared for the day ahead, Alexander found himself looking at the chessboard that now permanently occupied a corner of the living room. The pieces were arranged in the middle of a game, one that Lucas had set up to mirror a particularly challenging match he'd played with Isabella via video call. "She let me win that one," Lucas said, following his father's gaze. "But she made sure I understood why each move mattered. She said sometimes winning isn't about the final position, it's about what you learn along the way." Alexander smiled, recognizing another piece of Isabella's wisdom. She had orchestrated the most intricate game of all, setting up moves years in advance, not to defeat an opponent but to bring about healing and positive change. As they headed out to visit St. Mary's, Alexander realized that their story, his and Lucas's, was really just beginning. Isabella had given them the foundation, taught them the opening moves, but the rest of the game was theirs to play. And this time they would play it together, combining strategy with compassion, success with purpose. The transformation of St. Mary's Orphanage was nothing short of remarkable. In just a few weeks, the old building had been fitted with state-of-the-art sustainable energy systems, its drafty windows replaced with smart glass, and its aging infrastructure modernized. But the most significant changes weren't in the physical structure, they were in the lives being transformed within its walls. Lucas stood in the newly renovated computer lab, helping a young girl navigate through a basic coding tutorial. Around them, other children worked at sleek new workstations, their faces bright with concentration as they explored the educational programs Lucas had helped design. "You're getting really good at this, Maria," he encouraged, watching her complete a particularly challenging exercise. "Have you tried the chess program yet?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Parker showed me yesterday. He said I have good strategic thinking." Alexander watched from the doorway, taking in the scene with quiet pride. The education initiative had been Lucas's idea, using their technology and resources to create opportunities for children who might otherwise never have access to such advanced learning tools. Sister Margaret appeared beside him, her eyes misty as she observed the busy classroom. When Lucas first came to us, he was so quiet, so focused on his studies. Now look at him, teaching, sharing, helping others grow. He gets that from his mother, Alexander said softly. Isabella always saw education as a way to empower people. The nun smiled knowingly, and from his father he gets the vision to make it happen on a grand scale. She wasn't wrong. In the weeks since Victoria's departure, Richardson Enterprises had launched similar programs at orphanages and community centers across the country. The sustainable energy systems they installed did more than just reduce costs. They created opportunities for learning, growth, and positive change. Helena, who had become a regular presence at both the orphanage and the company, entered the lab carrying a tablet. "The board just approved the expansion of the education initiative," she announced. 10 more facilities will be upgraded by the end of the month." Lucas looked up from his teaching, his face bright with excitement. "Did they approve the scholarship program too?" Alexander nodded. "Full funding for any student who wants to pursue studies in sustainable technology or business ethics. Your mother would be proud of that addition." The mention of Isabella brought a thoughtful expression to Lucas's face. He excused himself from his student and approached his father and grandmother, pulling out his ever-present notebook. "I've been thinking about something Mama wrote in one of her video lessons," he said, flipping to a marked page. "She talked about how true success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what you inspire others to achieve." Helena touched the notebook gently. She always believed that education was the key to preventing people like Victoria from misusing power. Knowledge, properly shared, creates understanding. "That's why we're doing this differently," Alexander agreed, gesturing to the busy classroom. "Not just giving resources, but teaching people how to use them wisely." Lucas nodded, his expression serious beyond his years. "Mr. Parker says some of the students here could be ready for advanced programming classes soon, and Maria." He glanced at the girl he'd been helping. "She has a natural talent for system design, just like you, Papa." The pride in Lucas's voice when he said Papa still made Alexander's heart swell. Their relationship had grown stronger with each passing day, built on a foundation of shared purpose and mutual understanding. A commotion at one of the computers drew their attention. One of the students had successfully completed a particularly challenging project, a simple app that helped track the orphanage's energy usage and suggested ways to optimize it. "Another future innovator," Helena remarked proudly. "This is how we create real change, one mind at a time." As they watched the children work, Alexander reflected on how much had changed. The company was stronger than ever, but in a different way than before. Instead of just accumulating power, they were distributing it, creating opportunities for others to grow and succeed. Lucas tugged at his sleeve, pulling him from his. "Thoughts?" "Papa, I want to show you something." He led Alexander to a quiet corner of the lab where a special project was displayed on a screen. "I've been working on this with Mr. Parker," Lucas explained, pulling up a complex diagram. "It's a way to expand the educational program globally, using the same principles Mama built into the energy distribution systems." Alexander studied the proposal, impressed by its sophistication. This could help thousands of children. "Millions," Lucas corrected gently. "If we do it right." Mama always said that the best strategies look beyond the immediate game. As they discussed the details of the plan, Alexander couldn't help but marvel at how perfectly Isabella's vision had come together. She had prepared their son not just to protect the company, but to transform it into something truly meaningful. Sister Margaret called out from across the room. It was time for the afternoon chess club meeting. Lucas's face lit up with enthusiasm. He had started the club as a way to teach other children the strategic thinking skills that had served him so well. "Will you stay and help teach today, Papa?" Lucas asked. I'm showing them the Queen's Gambit." Alexander smiled, recognizing the deeper significance of the choice. Of course, some moves are worth sharing. 6 months had passed since the day Alexander first walked into St. Mary's Orphanage. The autumn air was crisp as he and Lucas made their way through Central Park, heading toward their weekly lunch at the same ice cream parlor where they had first truly connected. Lucas had grown slightly taller, his suits now regularly needed, adjusting, but his thoughtful demeanor remained unchanged. He still carried his notebook everywhere, though its pages now contained more than just observations and chess strategies. They held plans for the future, ideas for expanding their educational initiatives, and designs for new sustainable technology applications. "Mr. Parker says Maria's code passed all the security tests," Lucas reported as they walked. "She could start the advanced program next month if you approve." Alexander smiled, remembering the shy girl who had blossomed under their educational program. "She's not the only one. Sister Margaret tells me we have 12 students ready for advanced placement." They passed the Belvedere Castle, where their journey to uncover Isabella's plan had led them months ago. Lucas paused, looking up at the structure thoughtfully. "Sometimes I still expect to get a new message from Mama," he admitted. "A new lesson or puzzle to solve." Alexander put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Your mother gave us the most important lessons already. We just have to keep applying them." They reached the ice cream parlor, now a regular meeting spot for the Richardson family. Helena was already there along with Mr. Parker, who had become an invaluable advisor in their educational initiatives. "The new board proposals just came in," Helena announced as they sat down. "They're unanimously supporting the global expansion of the education program." Lucas pulled out his notebook, flipping to his latest project outline. "Then we can start implementing the satellite learning centers, the ones using Mama's distribution network design." Mr. Parker nodded, pulling up detailed plans on his tablet. "The first locations have been selected. We can begin implementation next month." As they discussed the specifics, Alexander watched, his son engage in the conversation with confidence and insight. Lucas had found his own balance between business acumen and social responsibility, carrying forward Isabella's vision while adding his own unique perspective. "There's something else," Helena said, her expression softening. "The Isabella Santos Foundation is officially registered. The board approved full funding this morning." Lucas looked up from his notebook, his green eyes bright with emotion. "Really? We can start helping other families like Mama wanted?" Alexander nodded. "The foundation will focus on supporting single parents and their children, providing education and opportunities. Your mother would have loved it." The foundation had been Lucas's idea, a way to honor Isabella's memory by helping others who might be struggling as she had. It would provide resources, education, and support to ensure that no other parent would have to make the impossible choices she had faced. "I found something in Mama's old research files," Lucas said, pulling out a worn envelope. "I think she meant for us to find it now." Inside was a letter, written in Isabella's familiar hand, dated just days before her illness. As Alexander read it aloud, her words filled the small ice cream parlor with her presence. "My dearest Lucas and Alexander, if you're reading this, then everything has worked out as I hoped. The company is safe, the technology is being used as it was meant to be, and most importantly, you've found each other. Lucas, my brilliant boy, you've carried such a heavy responsibility on your young shoulders. I prepared you as best I could, not just to face challenges, but to understand that true power lies in how we help others. Your father's strategic mind and my desire to make the world better, you've inherited the best of both of us. Alexander, my love, seeing you become the man I always knew you could be has been worth everything. Remember that success isn't measured in market shares or stock prices, but in the lives we touch and the changes we inspire. Together, you have the opportunity to create something remarkable, not just a successful company, but a force for positive change in the world. The chess game doesn't end with a single victory. It continues with each life you improve, each student you inspire, each family you help. Keep playing the game with wisdom and compassion. And remember that I am always with you in every move you make. All my love. Isabella. As Alexander finished reading, he looked at his son, seeing in Lucas's eyes the same determination that had driven Isabella. They had taken her carefully laid groundwork and built something even more meaningful than she might have imagined. "Papa," Lucas said, pulling out the chess set he now always carried with him. "Would you like to play a game? I've been working on a new strategy." As they set up the board, customers in the ice cream parlor watched with interest. The CEO of Richardson Enterprises and his young son playing chess together just like any other family. But this game was more than just a pastime. It was a continuation of Isabella's legacy, a symbol of the balance between strategy and heart that she had always championed. Helena watched them play, a proud smile on her face. "Isabella would love seeing this," she said softly. Her two chess masters working together to make her dreams come true. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as father and son continued their game, each move a step forward in their shared journey, each strategy a building block for the future they were creating together.